If you need your automations to be a little bit more powerful, to do a little bit more thinking for you, look no further than this video, because I'm going to be jumping into some more advanced automation practices within Airtable automations. We're going to be looking at repeating loops and conditional logic inside of Airtable automations. So if learning more about these two topics is of interest to you, stick around and let's get into it. Welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, my name is Gareth, and this is Gap Consulting. It's our mission to help you unlock the full potential of Airtable and related no-code tools. And in this video, we're going to be taking a look at those more advanced automation features within Airtable. Now, before I get to the heart of the video, I first want to invite you to join me for a free training. We put together our free Airtable crash course that will teach you all the basic building blocks of Airtable so that you can start getting maximum value out of your software with Airtable. If you want to go ahead and grab that, you can sign up absolutely free at gapconsulting.io/airtable-crash-course, and we'll deliver that training to you in your inbox. But without further ado, let's hop on into my screen and first start by taking a quick look at how we're setting up our data layer. Before we ever build automations, we always have to examine the data layer first. And so here I have users, and you can see that two of the users have collaborators, and one of the users is a client type here. So we're listing all of our users in one table, and we're denoting with this user type field, we're deciding, is somebody an internal user or an external user? Are they a client that we're doing work on behalf of, or are they a member of our team? And all of that data lives in our users table. We also see that we have a user status field here where we can mark whether a user is currently active or deactivated, or inactive in this case. And this will be relevant for a lot of the conditional loops that we are building inside of our automation. Now we're going to look at our tasks table. This is relatively straightforward. We have two types of tasks. You can see we have internal tasks grouped up top and then client tasks grouped to the bottom. Each task is assigned to somebody, and this is always an internal person. A task is assigned to someone internally, and we're able to look up the status of that user based on this activity, whether they're active or inactive on the users table. So this is just a lookup field. This will be relevant in a moment. Then we have the task status. Currently, all of these are set to in progress. We also see that we have overdue and complete. Then we have the due date of the task, the type of the task that we spoke about briefly, and then we're linking our tasks to clients if it is client work. So in this case, Sarah has been assigned the 2024 taxes, and that is going to be done on behalf of our client, Jason Dangerfield. Then you can also look up the email address of the client, and I'm looking up my own email address here for our example so that I don't spam other people with email. And then lastly, we have a date complete. So I realize that's a bit of data to unpack up front. But again, before we build automation, we always have to have a firm understanding of what it is we're dealing with, what we're working with, before we can start automating anything on the back end. Now, what we want to do first is build a relatively simple automation with some path, some conditional logic in it. Basically, what we want to do is say, if we update a task to be complete, we want to take an action on that. Now, what is the action? Well, if it is an internal task, we just want to date time stamp when it was completed. That's easy enough, right? Just boom, drop in the current date and time right there. But in a more advanced case, it might be a client-facing task. And maybe in these cases, we want to take some extra steps in our automation. For client work, we want to send the client an email with some information about the completed task, and then we want to mark it as complete. So you see that we've got two different paths that we're kind of choosing from here. In both cases, we do want to mark the date complete, but only in the case where it is client work do we want to send that email. So how do we do this? Let's jump into an automation. First, we're going to set up the trigger. In this case, the record will match conditions from our tasks table. So our tasks table, when we update the task status to complete, that is what will trigger the automation. Now, if we try to choose a record, we won't find anything because we don't have any tasks marked complete. So let's go ahead and mark one complete just for the practice of this. So I need to go to the task status here and mark it complete. Next, let's pop back into our automation and make sure that we get something that shows up here, and we do. So that's it. When a task is marked complete, it will then show up here. But we also want to ensure that we haven't already stamped this task as complete. So let's add a second condition that says the date complete is empty. Because if we've already filled out the date complete, then we know that we've already gone through this automation process and we don't want to do it again. We search one more time, we still see that, so let's use this task as we set up the rest of our automation. Now, when you're ready to add some conditional logic, you'll click on the advanced logic or action. And here at the top, we get our two advanced actions that we're talking about in this video. The first one is the conditional logic, and that's what we want to select here. So we can build conditional paths. This path where you see the blue rectangle, this is the one that we've currently selected, and we can set up what it is that makes this path what it is. So for us, we want to stipulate that the path is for internal projects. So we'll say that the task type is internal. And you can see just like that we now have assigned this group. And so now whenever we build actions within this group, they will only run if this condition is met. And we can add other conditions as well. For example, we might say the task type is client work. So now we have the ability to create different actions, different automation steps here, and they will only work for these two different tasks. So what are we going to do if it's an internal one? Well, we said we would just update the record, and we want to update the task that triggered the record. So we can select the record ID here for the triggering record. And all we want to do is update the date complete with the time that the automation is running. So for us, we'll say dynamic here, and we will bring in the specific time that the automation runs. That's all we want to do for the internal. But for the client work, we want to get a little fancier. So, of course, we also want to update the time. So let's duplicate this action and drag it on down into our second group here. But in addition to updating the time, we want to send that automated email. So let's go ahead and grab one. This option here allows us to send the email from Airtable. We also have other email options that we can add. We could do it direct from Gmail here. We can also send from Outlook. So for me, I like sending from Gmail. So let's go ahead and make this selection here. And I will load up my Gmail account. And who are we going to send it to? Well, we have this information in the record that triggered the automation, right? We have the email that came from the client. And I'll say new task complete. Now down below, we want to put in some information about the task that was completed. So we'll say something like, we just completed this task. And of course, you could make this a lot better, a lot more robust. But for our case, this is pretty straightforward and simple. Where is the name of the task? Here it is. Okay, perfect. So the task name we're just plugging in right here. And now we can turn this automation on, of course, give it a name as well, and we can test it. So if we are doing an internal task, let's say it's in progress, and then we mark it complete, well then, once we do this, the automation will run. It will find that it's an internal task and only update the date time. No emails are sent. But if it's a client task, like let's say this one here, and we mark it complete, then it will send an email to the client's email address and mark this complete as well. There it goes, just popped in with that. And if we go to the automation, we can actually look at the history to make sure that it worked perfectly both times. In this case, we see that it flagged it as an internal task and updated the record. And in the second case, it flagged it as client work, updated the record, and sent the email. So just like that, we have done our first automation using some paths, conditional logic within the automation, taking one or more actions given conditions that we establish in the automation path itself. Now let's take a look at the other type of advanced automation action, and that is looping or repeating steps within the automation. So for this one, we're going to flip back to our data and imagine a different scenario. Let's say, as of the recording of this video, it's October 29th, and I have 2 tasks here that are overdue, but they're not marked as overdue. They're in progress according to my task status here. But these 2 tasks were due days ago, and they have not yet been completed. So maybe I want an automation to look at my task list every single day and to tell me those tasks that are overdue and to spit that information out, change the status and flag them for me if they're not yet complete. How do we do this? So let's go ahead and jump back to our automations now, and we're going to build a new automation. And here we will say that let's trigger this on a scheduled time. So this would trigger every day, for example, every one day at maybe 8 a.m. or 7 a.m., whatever you choose. Test the trigger. There's nothing really to test here. We'll move on to the next step. First, we're going to find information. We want to find the records that we want to do something to. In this case, any record that has a due date before today. So let's go ahead and find records in the tasks table, and we'll set up our condition. We're looking for things where the due date is before, on or before, and let's get this a little bigger because this is hard to see. And here's where we could say on or before today. And so just like that, we can perform our search. Now, it's one thing to say, they're due before today, but we also want to make sure that the task status is not already complete, right? We want to make sure that they are still in progress. So let's add a condition, task status is in progress. And just to be extra safe, we can also say that date complete field is empty. Because if we have a date complete field, it means the task has been completed already. We don't want to perform the automation where we mark it overdue. So test this action step. And just like that, we find the 2 tasks that are essentially overdue, but we need to update that task status. So this is how we do it. First, we created that list, the find records function in Airtable. And now we can add the advanced logic or action. And we set up a repeating group. Now, the first thing we have to do is tell Airtable automations what group we want to repeat on. So we select the input list, and right here we're going to find the element in our automation where we got that list of records. So it's this find record step right here, and we will use it as a list. Now let's test the input list to make sure that it's going to do the right thing, and it's going to tell us, look, I've got a list, I have 2 different records, so whatever action steps you put in here, I would perform those steps for each record on the list. Let's do it. So what do we want to really do? We want to update the record, right? Update the record in the tasks table. And here's where we're going to map in the record ID of the current item that we're iterating on. Remember that these steps are going to perform for each record in the list. So we say using the current item in the list, bring in that record ID. And what do we want to do? Well, for us, we want to update the task status to be overdue. It's pretty simple automation, right? That's it for now. And so just like that, we could turn that automation on, and then it would, every morning at 7 a.m., find all the records that have due dates before today that are not yet complete, and it will go in and mark the status to show that they are incomplete. Now, what happens if you want to do something a little bit more advanced? Can you group together some repeating list of records, repeating steps, and conditional logic? Well, the answer is kind of, but not directly. Right here, if I were to add more things, you'll notice that I don't have the ability to bring in another repeat. I don't have the ability to bring in another conditional logic either. So I'm a little bit limited when it comes to this. Let's go ahead and actually duplicate this whole automation. This will be automation 2 copy now. And on this one, I'm just going to get rid of our repeating step here. When it's gone, you'll notice that I can drop in and I have the access to add a repeating group or add conditional logic. But unfortunately, I don't have the ability to do these things together. I cannot bring in a repeating group and then loop inside of it with some conditional logic or anything like that. So how do we get around this? Let's imagine a scenario a very advanced scenario where I want to take an action. If somebody is active in our system and their task was overdue, maybe I want to send them a Slack message. And if they are not active, then I don't want to send the Slack message, but I still want to update the task status. So in this case, flipping back to our automations, we can change the way that we're finding records and find multiple lists of records. So first we're going to look for, let's pop this one open. We're going to add in the condition where the user status is active. And I want to make sure to keep my find records functions really well labeled. So I'm going to go into the description and say find active user tasks, right? So now when I test this action, I'm only going to find one, right? Because only in this case of the financial analysis is it overdue and assigned to an active person, okay? So now I could, inside of my automation, add in a repeating group that, sends out this information only to these users. And now separately, I can build another automation. Let's go back to our original version here. And here I could set up the opposite and basically bring in that the assigned to is inactive. So in this case, I might just be using the inactive list and updating the status. And I have a separate automation that finds a different list. It's still being performed the same, it's just that it's taking different steps. Now, this is not ideal because ultimately I would love to have all of this under one automation. If you really want to get advanced within Airtable automations, we could build this into an automation script. So we could include, and this is frankly probably the most advanced part of Airtable automation, is adding in scripts. Now, of course, this does require that you're on a paid or an upgraded plan with Airtable, and it requires that you have a minimum scripting knowledge. Even if you're writing those scripts with, let's say, ChatGPT's help, you still need to have a basic understanding of how these components work. So this is definitely on the most advanced side of things, but if you're using the pre-baked scenario options that Airtable gives you, you can still get the functionality you're looking for by breaking your lists up and making them more specific in different automations. I know we went pretty quickly in this video, but I hope you got a ton of value from it. If you did, of course, we'd love it if you could give us a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and if you have questions that we did not answer here, please swing by our website because we've put a ton of resources together for you there. Most importantly, though, keep on building.